A butterfly effect is known as one small event changing coincidences for everyone, right? In sports, it's one play, one injury, one call, one missed call changing the outcome of sports and it changing it for forever, right? Derrick Rose's injury, Chicago Bears missing that field goal, Zion Williamson busted his shoe, Nick Saban going to Alabama instead of staying in the NFL, right? It changes the game for forever, right? And this topic gets brought up a lot because of what's going on right now in the finals, which is basically the Paul George final, because Paul George is basically responsible for getting both of these teams to the finals because of the trade of Paul George that both of these teams did, right, to set themselves up for this very moment. And if you actually look, there are a lot of examples of that in not only, in the NFL, but also in NBA, MLB, whatever, right? I picked out a few, right, that tend to kind of get brought up a lot, right? And these are the top kind of butterfly effect in sports, right? Number one, I think is obvious, right? Like I do think it is the most obvious example of a butterfly effect in sports, which is
Brady goes for the deep shot. He's got a touchdown.
The Tom Brady butterfly effect, right? For those of you who probably don't, probably, if you're not in a certain age demographic, you never saw rookie Tom Brady, right? So it essentially started in 2001, right? 2001, way back in the yesteryears. And by the way, I was looking up some of this, I was looking at some of these games. I cannot believe the quality of the games back then and what we thought were good quality. Because it looks like it was shot on not even an iPhone. It looked like it was shot on one of them kids' digital cameras you get for your kids. The quality of it is so bad nowadays. It's just like, if we brought somebody from, 2000 to now, they thought they would be watching a video game at the way this was shot. But anyway, in 2001, Drew Bledsoe signs a contract with the Patriots. He's the franchise guy. He's the guy there, already took him to a Super Bowl, lost to the Packers, but he is their guy. They believe in him. He's going to get them back to the Super Bowl, get them back over the hump, everything, right? Week 2 happens, game against the Jets, seemingly unknowing to them, would change not just the Patriots franchise, but sports in general. Because Mo Lewis hit Drew Bledsoe, took him out of the game, and enter in a 6th-round pick from Michigan, quarterback Tom Brady. And as we know, the rest is history, right? 7 Super Bowl rings, 10 Super Bowl appearances, MVP, TB12, TV time with Tom, everything, right? We know, the history of Tom Brady, right? Bill Belichick ends up becoming not just one of the greatest coaches of all time, but arguably the greatest coach of all time, even though right now his legacy took a little bit of a hit in the last few years, and now we'll see what he can do in North Carolina. Bledsoe gets traded to Buffalo, and he's, essentially out of the league at that point. And the AFC is basically Brady's division for 2 decades, right? For 2 decades, that was Brady's division. Every now and then a team might pop up, but arguably it was Tom Brady's division. All of that because of one hit, right? And the ripple effect of that is it changed the league in so many ways, right? Because obviously, like, to me, the biggest effect is it gave us Tom Brady, right? Greatest of all time, right? But I think a lot of people miss this too, is that it kind of changed how you looked at drafting a quarterback. Because nowadays, what's the whole thing, right? You draft a quarterback, you get him for 4 years on a cheap contract, you can build a team around him, and hopefully by year 3, maybe year 4, he takes you to a Super Bowl. He has shown, advances, right? he's on a rookie deal, so he doesn't have to get paid that much, and you can spend money elsewhere, skill position, offensive line, defense, right? You spend money someplace else, and he ends up taking a team to a Super Bowl, right? Hopefully, that's the hope, right? It didn't start with Tom Brady, but it kind of started with Tom Brady, right? Because that was now kind of essentially what you wanted to do with it, right? So that aspect of it was the fact of Tom Brady entering in, and especially with him being a 6th-round pick, it wasn't like he was getting a lot of money, even back then, right? He wasn't getting a significant amount of money, so they could have him on a cheap deal, so that way it was better for them, right? Because they could afford to build around him, and they did, right? And another ripple effect of that is for 20 years, he stopped Hall of Fame caliber guys from winning a Super Bowl. Just think about that. Think about the names that have been blocked from winning Super Bowls because of Tom Brady, right? Manning, Roethlisberger, Rivers, right? The 3 top quarterbacks in his era, right? Yes, we know Manning and Ben Roethlisberger has 2 rings, right? But if Tom Brady is not in the game, imagine how many rings he gets if there is no Tom Brady, right? Because Peyton spent most of his prime trying just to get over the hump of a Tom Brady. Some of the years where Peyton Manning was the best quarterback in the league, he could not beat Tom Brady. Ben Roethlisberger had one of the best teams we've seen in a while, had a 15-1 Steelers team, and lost to the Patriots in the playoffs. How many times have we asked, like, if it wasn't for the Patriots, how many rings would Mike Tomlin have right now, right? How many more rings would Bill Cowher have right now if it wasn't for the Patriots? All right. Phillip Rivers, again. Phillip Rivers, a guy who has had multiple 13-win seasons. One season they had a 15-1 record, was the best team in the NFL, and they lost to the Patriots in the first round, 2nd round back then, because that's when. But yeah, he lost the first round of playoffs for them, right? Phillip Rivers, Phillip Rivers. I don't know if people remember this. Phillip Rivers had a torn or partially torn ACL, and he still played in a game because he wanted to beat Tom Brady to get to a Super Bowl. He played in a game where he could not put any type of pressure on that leg because he wanted to win a Super Bowl that bad. Tom Brady blocked multiple people from getting a Super Bowl ring. How many years did they stop the Ravens defense from getting more Super Bowl rings? Ray Lewis could possibly have, at the very least, 3 Super Bowl rings right now. How many times did he stop? Excuse me. How many times did he stop, like, those Jets team from getting it? Right? I'll say this. The Jets team was the only team that really had, like, I'll say this. The Jets team was the only one that kind of had, like, that had Belichick's number in the playoffs, because they're the only ones that kind of beat him multiple times in those playoffs. But how many times did they not win the AFC East because of them? How many coaches got fired because they couldn't beat Tom Brady? How many potential draft picks got traded because they were trying to find a quarterback to beat Tom Brady? Right? Just imagine what the league would look like now if Tom Brady never got into that game. And you can say whatever you want. You can say all the things like, well, he would eventually. He's a 6th-round draft pick in 2001. They don't get opportunities like they do now, right? Like the NFL is almost kind of like Pee Wee League right now, where everybody gets a chance to play. Everybody gets a chance to kind of show what they got. No, this was not that league. If you were anywhere from the 6th round down, you probably didn't get too much playing time. Tom Brady essentially changed the league from that one injury and kept it going for 20 years. 20 full years of straight dominance. Now, it did get a little weary near the end of it, right? Specifically about 2019, where the rumors of him wanted to retire or whatever happened, right? And I'll say this, if the last time we saw Tom Brady in a Patriots uniform playing football in general was a pick six, it would have been a bad way for him to go out, right? Like, but again, he could have walked away from the game. 6 Super Bowl rings, 9 Super Bowl appearances, multiple MVPs. He had the GOAT category locked up already, so it wasn't even a debate on that, right? Like, if he walked away from the game in 2019, he would have been good, right? But he didn't. Tom Brady signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They go on to win the Super Bowl. Brady wins 7 rings. First one without Belichick, right? The effect of that is this, though. If Tom Brady does, let's just say, retire, if he does retire, we're looking at the league again a bit different, right? Tom Brady doesn't go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Maybe Aaron Rodgers gets to another Super Bowl. Right? Like, the NFC was not particularly strong in 2020. Aaron Rodgers gets to another Super Bowl. We're looking at him a little bit different. Patrick Mahomes goes back-to-back Super Bowls. Right? We're looking at him completely different now. Patrick Mahomes goes back-to-back in Super Bowls. Now we're kind of having this conversation of, is Patrick Mahomes the greatest player to do it, and to do it so fast, right? We're looking at it a lot different now, right? Where is Mike Evans in this conversation? Because, yeah, he put up another 1,000-yard season, but on a losing team. He doesn't have that Super Bowl ring to kind of help boost his Hall of Fame status. Brady goes to another team and just rockets his stats all the way up to places where I don't think people are going to ever catch him to. Although I think they may catch him now too, because the league is now very much pass heavy. So I think he'll be fine, and somebody will probably break it eventually. But it's just a conversation, because Tom Brady retires. Where are we looking at Bill Belichick? Because we see that Bill Belichick couldn't win without Brady. It would be the same way if Tom didn't leave, right? We're looking at Bruce Arians a little different, right? Bruce Arians, great offensive mind, but couldn't get nobody over the hump. So the Tom Brady ripple effect and the butterfly effect is super duper deep to go into. Trying to keep this short so I don't, go over time. But like it is something that you have to kind of look at. And it's like, Tom Brady caused a phenomenal ripple effect in the NFL that I don't think people truly do like look on it as like, oh my gosh, right? So the Tom Brady ripple effect will always be known as the thing that changed sports, right? Because especially if you look at it from this perspective, right? With 7 rings, he goes not from just being the greatest quarterback of all time, but goes to want to be the greatest sports players of all time, right? He's in a stratosphere of Jordan. He's in a stratosphere of Jeter. He's in a stratosphere of Gretzky, right? Like, he's one of those greats. So like, it changed the league in so many ways. I don't think we will ever truly be able to understand and appreciate the fact of what Tom Brady did just by entering in a game after the starting quarterback gets hurt.
Rodgers steps up and takes off.
I had to take the tie off. It was choking me. But the next kind of bigger butterfly effect would be probably Aaron Rodgers dropping to Green Bay, right? Because going into the 2005 draft, it was, Aaron Rodgers was predicted to go number 1. He was predicted to go to San Francisco, his hometown team. He was going to go there and kind of revitalize that franchise after, Jeff Garcia got there. He didn't really do anything, and this was a few years out from the Steve Young retirement from them. So he was supposed to go there, go to his hometown team, and take this franchise to historic heights. And he didn't do that. He ended up, dropping to Green Bay at 24. Alex Smith goes there, and they are still kind of looking for their quarterback. Again, mostly because of the quarterback curse. But yeah, this one had a different effect other than the Brady effect, because it wasn't like, oh my gosh, like this completely changed the league. But it did have a sense of Green Bay getting Aaron. They end up getting their heir apparent, right? He ends up taking them to a Super Bowl. He ends up getting 4 MVPs. He ends up getting, breaking almost every Packer record there is, statistically being one of the best quarterback for years. And San Francisco goes through Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick, Jimmy Garoppolo, all the way up to Brock Purdy. Still trying to find that next quarterback. And this one is interesting because if Aaron Rodgers does go to San Francisco, they end up being a powerhouse in the NFL for years to come. Because again, Aaron Rodgers is still there, mind you. Aaron Rodgers is still there. So let's just say, he takes a while to get to be an Aaron Rodgers. But like in 07, right? 07, they probably get to the Super Bowl. They don't, it's not the Manning, magical run to the Super Bowl. Green Bay probably doesn't get to the 2010 Super Bowl, right? He probably ends up still beating Pittsburgh to get his Super Bowl ring. But for them, their window is still wide open, right? Their window is wide open because then next year, if Aaron Rodgers is on there, you get Jim Harbaugh. And just imagine, again, that year with Patrick Willis, Bowman, all of those guys, that defense was unstoppable at certain points, right? It was unstoppable. And then you add in Aaron Rodgers onto that squad. That's a franchise. That's a San Francisco franchise dynasty right there. That is a dynasty, right? They get past the 20, they don't, they may get to the Super Bowl. They don't falter at the San Francisco. They don't falter. Slow down. They don't falter against Seattle in 2012. They get past Seattle. They are there for years, right? And this changes the franchise because Green Bay doesn't have their franchise quarterback, right? Like they spend time looking for their franchise quarterback. Like they may not be relevant for a while, right? They may not end up being what the Green Bay Packers are now, which is still a historic franchise on the rise and on the come up, coming back to where it was just a few years ago, right? Aaron Rodgers in San Francisco, he doesn't let Cam Newton go crazy like he did, right? Matt Ryan probably doesn't get as much exposure, right? He doesn't win the MVP. We don't have the Sean McVay era because he doesn't end up leaving to go to the Rams. His success in San Francisco keeps a lot of that at bay. We end up seeing 12 versus 12. We end up seeing more, possibly a 2-3 run of a Tom Brady versus Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl. Their window is still open now, right? Again, imagine a Kyle Shanahan and a Aaron Rodgers offense, right? Tom Brady still leaves to go to Tampa Bay, but that is a great rivalry going forward, right? Now we get to see this going back and forth, right? This is a ripple effect because it does change how the NFC plays out for the next few years, because at the end of the day, Aaron Rodgers did kind of change it, right? Like that one decision to not draft Aaron Rodgers changed the San Francisco 49ers for years to come. Maybe they get to a Super Bowl. We might end up seeing Aaron Rodgers versus Patrick Mahomes Super Bowl, right? It just isn't just something we talk about like, man, that would have been great to see. We get to see Aaron Rodgers in his prime versus an up and coming Patrick Mahomes, right? We get to see, again, old man Brady versus old man Rodgers, two gunslingers going at it, right? They stay dominant for years, right? San Francisco is a powerhouse. And the deeper question is, would he have ended up being the greatest San Francisco 49ers quarterback since Joe Montana? Because I don't see him being like the greatest one just off of like pure and utter like Joe Montana is the greatest San Francisco quarterback to ever do it, right? Without question. But he could have ended up challenging him, right? He could have had 3, maybe even 4 Super Bowl rings, and this changes his conversations from being, well, now is Aaron Rodgers up there with Brady as being one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever do it. This changes it. Now we look at Aaron Rodgers a way bit different, right? He could end up being the heir apparent to Tom Brady. Maybe Tom Brady doesn't stay in the league as long as he does because of Aaron Rodgers, right? Maybe he does retire sooner. Maybe Tom Brady doesn't have as many Super Bowls because Aaron Rodgers took some of them, right? So it is one of those things where it's just like, oh my God, like you look at it, what could have been for the San Francisco 49ers. And I do feel like every now and then they do kick themselves because they could have had one of the best quarterbacks to ever do it in their franchise, but they just passed on him. And they still never really like understand the reason why they passed on him. Like coming out of Cal, he was still he was a good quarterback. It's not like he was, blowing people out the water. But that year, it was not like it was a rich quarterback draft. So they could have picked him up and could have worked. So it's just one of those questions that always is, is always just one of those questions to where it's just like, man, what could have been for Aaron Rodgers if he would have stayed in San Francisco, or if he would have got drafted to San Francisco.
Kobe Bryant drains the trade.
So Butterfly Effect 3. This one doesn't get talked about a lot because of the fact that it kind of tarnishes a little bit of Kobe's, aura, so to speak, because again, one of the things that everybody loves to bring about Kobe is that Kobe never wanted to leave the Lakers. He stayed with the Lakers and he was always going to be a Laker for life. In 2007, Kobe was almost traded to Chicago. Right? Like Kobe was almost a Chicago Bull. And that would have, at that time, that would have reshaped the league completely reshaped the league. Because if Kobe got traded to Chicago, right, about a few things would have happened. Kobe goes to Chicago, right? 2007, right? Kobe goes to Chicago. He's in the East. East is a little bit easier than the West, right? You only have to really worry about at that time. It was Cleveland, Boston a little bit, the Pistons, right? Kobe could have entered the East and dominated with that Bulls team. And it would have affected, because I think the Celtics would have definitely tried to make that trade a little bit sooner to get their big three to combat Chicago. Cavs and LeBron would have had to do something to help LeBron get over the now hump of the Bulls instead of just it being Boston, right? You have Chicago now. And again, I don't think people realize this. If Kobe goes to Chicago never bottoms out. They don't get the first round pick. They don't get Derrick Rose. Like that is a key thing. They don't get Derrick Rose. And this morphs the league a little bit because Derrick Rose has 3 possible teams he could go to, right? The first one, he could go to Miami, right? Imagine Derrick Rose, a young Derrick Rose, mind you. Like, clips do him no justice, right? Like, if you never saw Derrick Rose live, if you never saw Derrick Rose do it when he was entering the league, you don't understand how good Derrick Rose was. Teaming him up with a still in his prime Dwayne Wayne in Miami, that team could possibly never go and get LeBron. So we don't hear, I'm going to South Beach. That team possibly ends up getting a title in 2 to 3 years. That reshapes it. Just imagine that. Maybe they build a super team differently. They don't go and get LeBron because they have a young talent there that they don't have to worry about, right? Like, they don't have to pay him. He can stay in Miami a little bit longer. So that reshapes the league there. Another option would be for him to go to the then Seattle Supersonics, but now the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? Like, he goes there, You get a prime D Rose, I mean a young D Rose, a young Kevin Durant. Both of those windows are wide open, right? Like we saw how good Kevin Durant was with Russell Westbrook. Imagine again a guy of the demeanor of Derrick Rose teaming with a Kevin Durant. They never make the trade for Harden. They have their point guard. Russell Westbrook probably, if he does get picked up, he doesn't end up getting in. They don't need him like that. The West is reshaped for decades, right? Oklahoma City could possibly run that for years. They have a stud at a guard and a killer shooter. They run it for years. And then the option that I think could have possibly would have happened is him going to Memphis with the Gasol brothers. Him going to Memphis. Again, imagine Ja now, but less guns. That's what that would have been. If you could team Ja Morant with both Gasol brothers, Paul and Mark, Zebo, right? That's a scary team right there into itself. It changes because now we may look at Derrick Rose a whole hell of a lot different. Kobe has to go into Chicago and kind of live or see if he can break out of Michael Jordan's shadow. Kobe goes to Chicago and succeeds there. The Lakers don't have the run of, that final little run of championship. They don't make it to the finals and they don't get the title in 2010. Boston makes that trade earlier than expected. Get their big three. They become an issue, right? Maybe, just maybe, Chris Bosh doesn't go to Miami. He ends up going to Chicago. And now we have a true big three versus a big three, right? Imagine a Chicago versus Boston potential Eastern Conference Finals, right? We saw what it was when a young Bulls team went against a then defending champion Boston Celtics. They took them to 7 games. Arguably the greatest playoff series we have ever seen in an NBA in my lifetime. That's just one of the Kobe alternative timelines, right? Because the other one is arguably the Chris Paul trade that never went out, right? Like the Chris Paul trade that ended up getting vetoed by the league, which, by the way, they never really said why they vetoed it, but they just say basketball reasons. Spooky, right? But imagine a Chris Paul with Kobe. That's all I gotta say. Just imagine a Chris Paul with Kobe. Chris Paul goes there. He doesn't go to Lob City. He's not there with the Clippers, right? Just imagine what could have been with a Kobe and a Chris Paul, right? Like that is a idea that I don't think people tend to really get, because again, it's just one of those things where they try to kind of hide it, so to speak, because they don't want Kobe to they don't want to tarnish that Kobe legacy. But Chris Paul going to the Lakers, just imagine that, because Chris Paul goes to the Lakers, the Warriors might not be a thing, right? The Warriors may not end up being as big as they are because they have to run into that Lakers squad. The Heat trade it affects the Heat trade because the Heat trade could turn out way different. Maybe they make that trade earlier. Maybe they hold off on it, right? Boston looks different. That is a true and unto itself, like just like biggest what if in the NBA. Like obviously, for me as a Chicago fan, the biggest what if is Derrick Rose and he doesn't go out. They probably end up winning that finals, whatever. But Kobe not being able to get that trade done, and both times, like 2 times denied a trade, significantly impacted his legacy, so to speak. Because maybe if he does get that trade, he ends up possibly passing Mike. He gets Chris Paul, he ends up possibly getting 7 rings. Where's his legacy at now as he would arguably be the greatest basketball player to do it. He gets 7 rings. Chris Paul is looked on way differently, right? Like he's no longer CP 0 rings, right? He might be CP 3 rings. We looking at Steph Curry a big different because now Steph Curry might be looked at as a bust. Right? Like, people forget, like, those Warrior teams earlier were not good. Steph was hurt a lot. We looking at this completely different. And it's just one of those cases where imagine if it did go down that way. Like, the Mamba would be remembered as the greatest basketball player to ever do it. Not just one of, would be the greatest to ever do it.
Inside handoff, Walker, first down and touchdown.
So this next effect is the reason why we have the term selling the farm as far as like NFL and trade goes, right? Because this trade happened and it impacted the league in a sense, because without this trade, we don't have the Dallas Cowboys as the team of the 90s. We don't have the return of America's team. We don't have Jimmy Johnson being known as the Hall of Fame coach, right? We don't have, I don't know, maybe that trade was a good idea. We don't have Jerry Jones being crazy. I don't know. This might affect people's mental health. Just in general, this might affect people's mental health because Dallas has never let this go. But in '89, Dallas traded Herschel Walker to the Minnesota Vikings for like 5 picks and 6 players. One of those picks ended up being Emmitt Smith, Hall of Fame running back, obviously. And Dallas goes on to win 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. You know, they become America's team. You know, we know the history of Dallas at this point, right? Like, Jerry will never let us forget it. Neither will Dallas Cowboy fans ever let us forget it. But this trade really kind of brought the whole aspect of one player away to the forefront, so to speak, right? Because this trade happens and Dallas gets their players to build literally they have built their entire franchise off of, right? Like, this one trade significantly impacted the league so much that it changed how people think about trades now, right? Like, you don't think about trading the whole farm away essentially to get one player, especially if that player now doesn't get you get you where you want to be, which is the Super Bowl for the Vikings, right? Like, they never reached the Super Bowl with this trade. They traded away everything. And now they didn't have any draft picks for years, right? And like, a few things branched out from this, right? Jimmy never builds his dynasty off of this, right? Jimmy doesn't get Emmitt Smith, doesn't get Darrell Woodson, he doesn't get Alvin Harper, right? Troy Aikman viewed on as a bust. That year, again, 98, 1-15. They were 1-15. They were terrible, right? They were terrible. Troy Aikman's viewed on as a bust. White Jay-Z is not calling ESPN Monday Night Games right now if it's not for this trade. They don't have a balanced offense. They don't have anything to kind of help take that pressure off him. They don't get better on the offensive line, right? You look at just how the NFL was structured back then, right? Dallas is not the team of the 90s if this trade doesn't happen. San Francisco might be. We might have looked at a team that dominated in 2 decades, in the 80s and the 90s, right? Joe Montana and Steve Young would have been unchallenged. Maybe Brett Favre could have done it. Might have been able to done it, but I don't think that. I think if it came down to it, it would have been San Francisco. Right? We don't have, unfortunately, we don't have Jerry Jones to kind of be what he is now, which is the crazy dude trying to get back to what he used to be, right? But we also don't have America's team, and it doesn't kind of propel not only the Dallas Cowboys, but NFL to a little bit of a market boost, right? Like, you have the team of the 90s. I've said this before. People wants to take down the Empire, and the Empire was, at that time, the Dallas Cowboys. They were a juggernaut. They were the team. That was that team that you wanted to beat. I'm not saying, I don't view this as the worst trade of all time. There are other trades that are far worse than this one. But I do think that at that time, this trade made front office people think about how we want to trade going forward, right? Do we want to trade away multiple picks for one player if that player doesn't end up panning out for us. Because imagine if they don't trade those picks away and they end up landing in Emmitt Smith, right? He could be there for years to come and then get there with, imagine Emmitt Smith, and if he stays there long enough, him teaming up with a Randy Moss, a Chris Carter, and a Randall Cunningham in that year where they almost got to the Super Bowl. Right? Imagine that. That could have been a team that would have been dominant. Dallas is not viewed on as the same thing without this trade. We don't have, if I'll put it to you like this, if this happened, we'll still have kind of that whole thing of one player away and trading away multiple draft picks to get one player, hurting your team in the long run for a short-term goal. Right? So this impacted it so as far as like a league and like an NFL and a team status of where this kind of reshaped people thinking of like, okay, maybe let's not trade the whole farm away to get this. Let's just, think about this wisely, smartly. Let's trade some picks away to get it. But yeah, Dallas would not be remembered as fondly as they were without this trade. So shout out to Herschel Walker. He finally did something positive. Because again, Herschel Walker is a walking example of CTE. Like whatever, Herschel Walker needs his brain examined now. All I gotta say is the werewolves and vampires. Like he was watching it like it was a documentary. Just Google that, kids. Werewolves versus vampires, Herschel Walker. If you ever need a laugh in these dark times, that will give you a smidge of comfort.
Oh, a spectacular move by Michael Jordan.
So my last butterfly effect. This one affected the NBA so profoundly that it literally would have changed the NBA as we know it today, right? Like if this one thing did not happen, the NBA would not be what it is, right? Like the most famous draft miss in NBA history, right? The single most important draft pick that happened in NBA history happened in the 1984 draft, right? We all know it. Michael Jordan going to the Chicago Bulls at number 3. Sam Bowie goes number 2. Hakeem goes number 1. That single moment changed the NBA forever. Because again, Michael Jordan, right? Michael Jordan to Chicago, perfect storm. Everything goes the way it's supposed to be. 6 NBA titles, 6 NBA finals. He's a global icon. Bulls become the team of the 90s. Nike literally builds its empire off of Jordan, right? Their empire is not what it is without that. But if that does not happen, the impact that move had affected global business to where it single-handedly changed how we view basketball now. Because again, just think about it like this. So Jordan goes number 2. Jordan goes number 2, and we don't know, maybe Bulls pick up Sam Bowie. Right, cool, whatever. Jordan goes number 2, right? He goes to Portland. NBA in the 80s was a big different than what it is right now, kids, right? So NBA in the 80s, there was not like 600 channels where you could watch an NBA game, right? Like there was no NBA TV, there was none of that. You watched either your local game or your national game, right? Like that was it. That was it. So you might have seen the Portland Trailblazers maybe once or twice a month if they were lucky. Even if Jordan was still Jordan, the Portland Trailblazers weren't going to be on national TV that much. So globally, we don't see Jordan. So his TV presence is not there. So with fewer national televised games means fewer fewer international viewers on him. So the expansion that they were trying to do slows completely down, right? They don't really have anyone to build around. They can build around Hakeem in Houston because, still a big market. But if you thought now was hard to build around an international star, imagine back then, right? It doesn't have anybody to build around that's a homegrown golly gee hero, right? It doesn't have that. They don't have MJ to build the NBA around. MJ doesn't take off like he's supposed to, right? He doesn't become the global icon that he is, even in those earlier days. He doesn't pick up. He doesn't become, the face of Nike. Nike does not become what it is today. Nike probably, they still signed Jordan. Obviously, I think Nike would have signed Jordan no matter what. But if Jordan was not on TV in Chicago, they don't get the exposure. So you're not buying Jordans, right? Like you might be buying the Sam Bowie shoe. Who knows, right? You might be buying the Barclays, right? You might be buying the Dreams, but you wouldn't be buying Jordans. So Nike doesn't get the exposure that it needs to build its empire off of the back of Jordan. So globally, they can't sell their shoes all around the world. So Republicans wouldn't be buying shoes either. The revenue from that the NBA would have gained slows down completely. It doesn't get as big, right? Like it still gets revenue because obviously, right? But it only gets more like of US revenue, right? It doesn't get the global revenue that it was getting from the exposure that Jordan got while he was in Chicago. Right? It doesn't really have a shot of becoming the NBA as we know it today, where in the 90s, the NBA was must-watch TV with the Bulls, right? With the Bulls in the 90s, NBA was must-watch TV. Those runs, those three-peats that he had, people were tuning in for them. I don't think it gets that if it wasn't for Jordan in the 90s with the Bulls. It slows down. So that on itself is crazy, just for the pure fact that one dude affected the business side of the NBA so drastically. Now, on the court side of it, it still affects him because you have to ask the question, how is Jordan's legacy viewed if he doesn't win the 6 rings in Chicago? He still wins rings, right? Because again, Portland back then still had Clyde the Glide. They still had Kevin Duckworth, shout out EIU, right? Like they still had a squad over there. So they could still do it. If Clyde and Jordan can get together and figure it out, they become a dangerous 1-2 combo. They become scary. But if you look at it, the East at that time was significantly easier, right? You only really had to go through Boston to get to the finals. I know I'm saying only had to go through them. Like, that's not crazy enough as it is. But you only had to go through Boston and get to a finals. In the West, in the 80s, just you had Magic in the 80s, right? Still at its peak. You had Magic, Showtime, Lakers in the 80s. The Rockets just got Dream, right? Mind you, Dream is the only player that gave Jordan the flux. He is the only one that Jordan has a losing record to. He's the only one. You can Google fact check me. I've done this several times. Hakeem Olajuwon is the only one Jordan has a losing record against. So you have that. You have Stockton and Malone in Utah, right? Later on, you would have Barkley with the Suns. Later on after that, you would have Duncan and Robinson with the Spurs. So the West would be significantly harder for Jordan to get through. So now we have to view if we view his legacy through that lens, maybe he doesn't get 6 finals appearances. Maybe he doesn't go 6-0 in the finals. Maybe he gets 3 rings, 4 rings, maybe, right? We are looking at, now we have to look at his legacy as a little bit different than not being if Mike ends up going to Portland, we don't view him as the literal measuring stick for what an NBA player wants to be considered the great as, right? He's viewed as still one of the greatest to do it because you got 3 rings or 4 rings, but he's not the GOAT. He's not the guy that you have to beat to be the final king, right? He's not the final boss, essentially. We view him through that. You look at Chicago. Do they get to a finals? Are they still in the mud for years and years to come? Do they get Phil Jackson to come there? Do they make the playoffs? Do they make the finals? Do they make anything, right? Or are they in the mud for years to come? Not only that, but then we have to view the legacy of other players, right? Because if Jordan is not the greatest, then how do we view Kobe's legacy going forward, right? Kobe gets 5 rings. Is he the guy? Is he the measuring stick of the NBA at that point? Is he the guy that can take this NBA globally? Is he the guy to boost the numbers nationally? You have to look, if it's not Kobe, do we wait for LeBron to be the guy, right? Do we wait for LeBron to come into the league and he's the one that explodes the league up? How do we view LeBron's legacy going forward, right? With 3 to 4 rings with Michael, where is LeBron on the GOAT conversation? Is it between Kobe and LeBron now? So like this one move drastically changed how the league is viewed today. Is the league as big as it is if it's not for Jordan? Is the league as, dominant as it is if it's not for Jordan? How is his legacy viewed through the lens of greatest of all time if he doesn't go to Chicago? If Portland picks him up, what would his lasting impact be? This is why this one might, to me, is the biggest sports butterfly effect there is, right? Like I know Brady is the Brady effect, right? Like we all talk about that, but this one affected so much from just not only a business aspect, but on the court aspect. As far as Brady goes, that was mostly on the field. This one affected not only on the court, but business wise for the NBA. Do they become as big as they are today without Jordan going to Chicago? You have to ask that question. And again, as far as the legacy on the court goes, is Jordan as big as he is? Is Jordan the measuring stick if he's in Portland and he's not in Chicago? This is why, to me, I said this single-handedly could be the greatest sports butterfly effect, the greatest sports what if there is right now. Shout out to Sam Bowie. Hey, and again, I know we talk about this, but does anybody truly remember Sam Bowie? If not, I want people to remember Sam Bowie as the guy who could have been the reason why the NBA wasn't as big. I want him to be remembered as the guy who literally built the NBA off of being slightly better than Jordan in college for him to go number 2 and Jordan to go number 3. So shout out to Sam Bowie. Give that man his flowers. Because if it wasn't for him going to Portland, I don't think the NBA would be the same as it is right now. But ladies and gentlemen, that is my time. Shout out to y'all for listening. Shout out to Fluent Radio for putting me on as always. Let me know down below. Let me know down below in the comments. Like, what are y'all biggest sports butterfly effect, right? Nick Saban staying in Miami instead of going to Alabama. If Drew Brees ended up, going to Miami, right? Zion was not busting his shoe wide open on the court. That affected the NIL deal. It's a lot of sports butterfly effects, right? Leave them in the comments below. If you don't want to do that, y'all can go to the Fluent Radio Instagram page, Fluent Radio. You can leave comment there. Leave them, tag Mel in them specifically. Just tag Mel in them. Don't tag Sandra because she probably won't understand all of the lingo we're saying. Just tag Mel in it. He'll come tag me into it. So just do that, right? But shout out to y'all. Shout out to y'all for listening. Shout out to Fluent Radio for putting me on. Till next time, guys. I got 2 fingers for you. Deuces. Because I Have a Live Mic was proudly presented to you by Fluent Radio, where all things are fluent. Please like, share, and subscribe. All right, 2 fingers. Deuces.